Okay, new glasses, new year, who dis? Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I hope you're doing really well wherever or whenever in the world that you are. I'm filming this after the new year, so I hope if you were celebrating, you had a wonderful and safe and energizing, delightful New Year's Eve or New Year's Day or whatever you do to celebrate. And if you don't celebrate for whatever reason, I get it. New Year's can be a bit overhyped. And so I hope you had a lovely, relaxing evening in that case. Maybe you were curled up with a nice book, you know, relaxing by the fire, whether the fire's on your TV or in real life, you know? Vibes. Anyways, I'm a glasses girly now. I went to the eye doctor for the first time in my adult life / ever. I'm farsighted, so I get to wear glasses for things that are up close. And I'm on the camera and I'm looking at my computer, and so I'm very excited. Wow, I just did so much rambling. Hi everybody. Welcome to the video. We're gonna do a 2023 books in review kind of snapshot. I did not have the time or the brain space to film a lot of the quintessential end of year countdown list kinds of videos. And so I'm gonna kind of condense all those videos into one, and we're gonna talk about some of my favorite books from 2023, some of my pleasant surprises from 2023, and then of course, some disappointments and flops. So I hope you're ready. I hope you have something cozy to drink or eat, because this might be a long one, because again, I haven't posted in a while, and I'm feeling energized and excited to talk about books. So here we go. We're gonna start this video off with the flops. And specifically, I'm gonna talk about 3 books in this section. And for me, what I think of when I think of flops are books that I hated, period. They just were not for me. They did not bring me joy. I begrudgingly finished them, if I finished them at all, and I still have negative feelings about them. And so those are flops. The first book that I want to talk about is one that I think is actually quite beloved, is very popular, and especially in the dark romance community, but I did not like it. That is Hate by Tate James. So I think I just want to preface this by saying, if you have loved this book, great, I love that for you. If you love it and hate my thoughts, great, I love that for you. These are just my opinions. That's the fun of these kinds of lists, is it's fun to see what books you have in common with people and the ones that you love and the ones that you hate. So, don't come for me for any of these books. If you love them or are thinking of reading them, you still should. This book in particular was just not for me. But I really do think I'm in the minority. I think so many people really love this book, but more importantly, this series. And so, okay, that's my preface over. This is an enemies to lovers reverse harem romance, which cool, I'm down with. My problem is more with the main character, Madison Kate. I could not stand her. She felt so childish and immature. Now, the plot of this is interesting. The reverse harem, sure, I've not read a lot of those, so I'm intrigued. I love a revenge storyline. Yes, get vindication, love that. And I understand why she's seeking revenge. That makes sense. But I want her to be discreet and cunning, and for there to be a sophistication around this revenge, and that's not what this book is. At least she felt, or so many of her actions throughout what I read, spoiler alert, I didn't finish this book, so many of her actions felt really impulsive and just kind of impetuous, immature, and frustrating, and not in a, oh, morally gray kind of way, just in a, I didn't like her kind of way, I guess. I also didn't find any of the guys compelling or all that sexy. They just felt kind of bland to me, and I wasn't invested in any of this enemies to lovers potential dynamic. I think when I was reading a lot of the reviews for this book, people did say she grows a lot throughout the series. And so that's what I mean. If you're interested in this series, maybe still read it. But for me, I just couldn't get through it. I DNF'd this book at 35% and have no regrets. We love self-care, and that book wasn't for me. The next book that was a total flop for me, a total flop, maybe the worst book that I read in 2023, was A Lady of Darkness by Melissa Roherch. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce their last name, but that's my best guess. This book, I believe I stumbled upon thanks to Book Talk, and did me dirty. The premise of this story is compelling. You've got this badass female assassin going on this mission, and then of course along the way, all of these mysterious circumstances are revealed. Like, great, we love that premise. And it's an enemies to lovers romance to boot. This has all of the ingredients to a book that I would love, a series that I would love. And yet, reading this was a grave error. It was a grave mistake on my part. Scarlett, the main character, might actually be the worst female protagonist I've ever read. Like, I think I dislike her more than I dislike Jude from The Cruel Prince, and that is a strong statement for me. She is so whiny and short-sighted and just like insufferable overall. I'm genuinely confused about how people like her as a main character. Like, I'm confused. If you like her, please help me understand. Like, did I miss something? Aside from me really struggling with the female main character, another thing that I did not like about this book is it is absolutely 100% telling, not showing. Characters just proclaim these big feelings and whatever, and like, why? I don't see any evidence to this. I'm just being told that characters think and feel this way, and it just felt really shallow and unsatisfying. And if I remember correctly, there's like a lot of exposition within the dialogue, which takes away from the chemistry of between the characters and just made so many relationships, interpersonal exchanges boring. I also like didn't love the romance. Like, I didn't believe it, I didn't buy it, and I didn't care for it. I considered DNFing this book the entire time, but I was fueled by my hate fire to keep reading, and I regret that decision. I should have DNF'd it like 20% in. Ugh. Anyways, I could rant for a long time about this book. This is one that is definitely overhyped. Book Talk led me astray. I don't know that I would recommend this unless like you're really craving something that's similar to Throne of Glass. Then this might scratch that itch, but it's just not as good. So anyways, the final book that was a huge flop for me was An Ember in the Ashes? No, An Ember in the Shadow? A Shadow in the Ember by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I think I ended up giving this book maybe 2 stars. I was rereading books from the Blood and Ash series because I wanted to catch up in that series. I know that this book is recommended before or after The Crown of Gilded Bones, I can't remember. And so this is sort of like a companion complementary series to Blood and Ash. I think it's supposed to like give you more context of the world building and the lore, which is fine, like great. I love an expansive series, like that's so fun. But because I was kind of reading them back to back, I was binging the series a little bit, I realized that this book hits the exact same beats as Blood and Ash. The same dynamics, kind of the same plot points. It felt really predictable and like kind of stale and overdone. Sarah, I think that's the character from this book. She is a carbon copy of Poppy from Blood and Ash. I think I even made a note of it. From my Goodreads review, they're both described as being impulsive, being good fighters, being so curious for asking like really obvious and understandable questions, and for being like unexpected and intriguing. I felt so bored. I was like, yeah, I've already read this story. Why am I reading it again? I don't know. Also, the main character, however you say that, was also like dry, and I didn't find him appealing or sexy or interesting at all. And so that was a bit of a disappointment. Yeah, their chemistry was just kind of blah. So I felt like this was so unnecessary. I think if it was a novella, maybe fine, but this book did not have any right to be over 600 pages. That's just rude and unnecessary. And I didn't like it. It was a major flop for me. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about some pleasant surprises, some books that I went into with really low expectations and was delighted by in the end, or books that I had never really heard of and ended up loving. I have two of these books. The first book I want to talk about is Lessons in Chemistry by, oh my God, what is Bonnie Garmis? I can't remember the author's name. Obviously the book cover will be up here so you can see for yourself. But initially I was not sure how I was gonna feel about this book. I didn't know much about the plot. I kind of just knew that they were coming out with a TV adaptation, and we picked it for one of our book clubs. I also feel like because I had seen it a lot on Book Talk and Instagram, and I just saw the cover everywhere, so that always makes me a bit skeptical, like, is this book gonna be overhyped? And I'm not gonna lie, the first few chapters, I was not drawn towards dear old Elizabeth Zott. I found her cranky and rigid and not super likable. But of course, as the book progresses, you just see so much more of her. And by the end, I was like so charmed by Elizabeth Zott. And I was like, I love you. Yeah, this book surprised me in all of the best ways. I got emotional and I was teary at certain parts of the book. I loved getting to know the side characters. Like 630 is everything. And I just fell in love by the end with all these quirky characters, and I was so invested in Elizabeth's story, and I really loved it. I was so pleasantly surprised. It was so fun. I've watched the first episode of the show, but I haven't watched beyond that, so I want to make sure I continue on. But yeah, all in all, this ended up being a delight, and I gave it a 4.5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is a series. I mean, I'll just talk about the first book, but this is totally new to me, a complete impulsive pickup. Again, I was scrolling on Hoopla and just said, sure, I like that cover. So the next book I want to talk about that was a pleasant surprise was A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. I had so much fun reading this book, but also this series. It's a trilogy, I think. The third book comes out in 2024, and I'm very excited about it. But this first book, you get introduced to our main character, Kira, and she's a badass. She's an assassin who is assigned by the king to track down this mysterious figure. And of course, like as the story progresses, things are not as they seem, the world expands, and you just get to kind of go through that journey with Kira, and it's fun. Now, some of the plot points are like a bit predictable, a bit on the nose, but there were definitely a few clever twists and turns that I didn't completely see coming, and so that was really fun, especially at the end. Kira, to me, is also a really compelling character. She is flawed. Like, there are definitely some character traits and things that she does, decisions that she makes that drives me crazy, but she's not doing it like because she's just like impulsive and immature. She also has some really admirable and interesting character traits. So like, I love that she's this complicated character. It's what makes her so compelling. There are also some amazing side characters that you get to know like throughout the books who are fantastic and add such a richness and a found family element to this book. It's great. There's also quite a bit of lying and scheming, and I kind of appreciate how there is a lot of doubt. Like, as the reader, you're not always sure who to trust and who's being truthful or honest. So that just adds such an interesting element to like a seemingly straightforward plot. You know what? Similar to A Lady of Darkness or whatever that book was, this is also very reminiscent of Throne of Glass to me in the sense that it like hits some of the same beats, but I think it's better. It was so good. I really liked it. I'm really excited for the next book to come out. I'll definitely do a little reread before that book comes out, because yeah, it was really fun. I think I ended up giving 3.5 stars to book 1 and then 4 stars to book 2. So I love that momentum. I love that upward trajectory. What a pleasant surprise. I loved it. You should read it. Okay. Counter to my pleasant surprises, I had a couple disappointments. The first one was Jasper Vale by Devney Perry. This is the 4th book in the Eden series, and it was Eloise's story, and I've been looking forward to her story for years, it feels like. She is so quirky, and I just was so charmed by her in all of the earlier installments. Like, I was so looking forward to her story. And I was initially very intrigued by Jasper, her love interest. He's very mysterious and brooding. And I found that, like, I was like, okay, I like this little, it wasn't quite like Grumpy Sunshine, but it was reminiscent of that. But the things that I struggled with this book were, one, I didn't care that much about their relationship, which is like so disappointing. That's the whole point of this stupid book. I didn't really buy their chemistry. I didn't like them together. I was so ambivalent about it by the end. It was so blah. I just didn't care. And that sucks, because I really did like both of them individually. Just together, it was they were underwhelming as like a dynamic duo, a romantic pairing. If you're not familiar, a lot of Devney Perry's books have this like romantic suspense, or like the suspense thriller kind of subplot. And in this installment, I didn't like it. There was one part in particular that felt very propaganda, pro-policing energy. And that's just like not something I'm looking for in books in general, but also not in my romances. And there was some stuff that happens towards the end that felt really unnecessary. And it was, I don't know, it took away from my enjoyment of the characters. And I also think the pacing of the suspense plotline felt off. The ending was really rushed, which, you know, I love like a big fun reveal at the end of a suspense thriller, but it just was cramped and it just didn't pay off, I don't think. All in all, this installment was really underwhelming, and I think I'll probably DNF the series here. I don't really care to continue on. I don't think Devney Perry is like the romance author for me. Themes that come up in her books rub me the wrong way, and her romances, the characters, the character development, the relationship dynamics are also pretty hit or miss for me. So yeah, I think I'll DNF her as an author at this book. I just don't care to really pick up anything else from her. So that was Jasper Vale. A bit of a disappointment. The other book that was quite disappointing was Mine Till Midnight by Lisa Kleypas. I had just read, sorry if you can hear Frances in her litter box. What was I saying? I had just read the Wallflower series by her and loved it. So I jumped right into the next series for me, which was The Hathaways. I think this is, I don't know, this might be, what book is this? Is this the first book? Yeah, it's the first book in the Hathaway series. This book felt really dated to me. She frequently uses this word. I'll put it on the screen. And I don't like that. I don't like her casual use of a derogatory term for a group of people that is like really outdated. So that rubbed me the wrong way, especially because she's a white lady writing romance using a racial slur. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Cam, who is the male love interest, was also a bit too aggro, forceful, alpha male for my liking, especially in the context of historicals. I don't always love that energy in my male main characters, or like the love interests. I think I gave this book 2 stars, maybe 2.5. I did continue reading on because, again, most of Lisa Kleypas's books I really like, but I will say this series is not my favorite. I didn't love the first 3 books in this series, but I ended up really liking the last 2, like books 4 and 5. I think they were Married by Morning and Love in the Afternoon. Those I thought were really great and they're really fun. As a side note also, I didn't love the audiobook narrator for this particular series. It wasn't my favorite Mary Jane Wells, who I love, who does a lot of Lisa Kleypas's series, but it was a different audiobook narrator. And so I was a bit let down by that as well. So yeah, all in all, I didn't love Cam. Oh, I forgot to mention, Amelia is the female main character. She's just kind of bland. Like, she was just boring. I didn't love much about this one. So yeah, it was a bit of a letdown, especially because The Ravenelles was like one of my favorite romance series ever. And I also really liked the Wallflower series. So this was a bit of a letdown. Okay, now the creme de la creme from 2023. My favorite books. I can't wait. Let's go. I think I have 6. Yeah. We'll go 6-1. So you got to stay till the end to hear my favorite book. Although if you've been casually checking in like on Goodreads or some of my recent posts, like you'll probably already know. All right, my 6th favorite book from this year, I read right at the very end of the year, like literally December 30th. And that is Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H. And I purchased this book at Indie Bookstore Day like earlier in the year. And I was really, really looking forward to it. The Goodreads blurb says, a queer hijab Muslim immigrant survives her coming of age, drawing strength and hope from stories in the Quran in this daring, provocative, and radically hopeful memoir. And I think that's such a perfect encapsulation of this memoir. It was so interesting. It's beautifully written. I love when memoirs are not told in a linear chronological way. I just think it adds so much more interest in a memoir. And not necessarily that it makes anyone's life stories more or less compelling, but just like in the way that it's written. And so this story is not told chronologically, like of her life, of her coming of age. Instead, she has kind of these prophets or stories or themes, these verses from the Quran. And then from there, she kind of draws all these connections to her life. And it was fascinating. There are moments where I giggled, there were moments where I felt really emotional. And I'm not a religious person at all. And so I wasn't sure how this memoir was going to resonate with me. And I think that just speaks to how well it's written, is because I felt so deeply connected and I could relate to so many different pieces of this memoir, even though I have a very different lived experience than Lamia H does. And yeah, I just thought it was great. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I've already told like everyone in my family, I'm like, you gotta read this memoir. It's great, because it is. And I loved it. And I'm obsessed. And I think I already want to reread it. I just have to decide when. My 5th favorite read from 2023 was Above Ground by Clint Smith. This, first of all, I'm such a fangirl for Clint Smith. Literally everything he publishes, like I could devour. I'm obsessed. Anyways, this is a poetry collection that centers the experience of parenting and what it's like to be a parent, and all of the fears and worries and hopes and dreams and joys and laughters and tears, like all of the things that encompasses being a parent. And even though I myself am not a parent, I mean, I'm a cat mom, but not to human babies, I felt so connected to these poems. They're beautifully written. I cried, I giggled. I really enjoyed every minute I had while I was reading this collection, and I really paced myself. Like I didn't binge read all of the poems. I really took my time and read it over several months, and I did the immersive listening experience because I think I've mentioned this before. Clint Smith does spoken word. I wanted to be able to hear his cadence and his rhythm and his intonation as I was reading the poems, and it elevated the reading experience. It was phenomenal. I think I wrote down some of my favorite poems. Even going back, I'm like, I want to reread some of these. Okay, here are my favorite poems. Sorry if the camera just got a little shaky. Whoa. Here are a few of my favorite poems. By Chance, No Deception, The Great Escape, The Gun, Gold Stars, Zoom School with a Toddler. I literally giggled out loud. That was such a good one. Ars Poetica and Punctuation. I mean, they're all good. If you've read it, please let me know your favorite poems from his collection. It is so, so good. And I don't read a lot of poetry. And so as a novice, I'm obsessed. I loved it. My 4th favorite book from 2023 was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This has been on my bucket list for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And I've been intimidated and I haven't started it, but my sister's boyfriend picked up the series this summer and he's already caught up. Like he's such a fast reader, but he was raving about it. And so finally I was like, ugh, okay. I was feeling left out and I wanted to be able to talk to him about it because he's also a big fantasy reader. And so I was like, okay, I'm reading it, I'm doing it, and I did it. And it was great. I really get the hype for this book. Even though this is a huge kind of intimidating book, I was engrossed. I was like totally captivated the whole time. I love the different POVs that you meet. I especially like Kaladin and his bridge running. There was like 500 pages of them running these bridges, and I was so stressed the whole time and I couldn't stop. It was fascinating. But I also loved getting the other characters' POVs, and when their storylines start to connect, it makes me really, really excited to read on in the series. It was so fun. I was completely absorbed. I loved every second of it. And yeah, I just can't wait to continue on in the series. So I get the hype. It was totally worth it. I think I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, only because, and this was more of like my reading experience, I picked this book up and I was really excited, and then I got really slumpy and I had to come back to it like in November, and it took me a while to get back into it. So I don't think that has anything to do with the book. It's like just my reading experience of it, because like I got slumpy. It was great. That's how good it was, is despite that like 2 or 3 month period where I didn't read it, I came back and was still obsessed. So it was great, loved it, had so much fun. All right, my third favorite book from 2023, and I'm cheating a little bit here because I'm just gonna put the Crowns of Nyaxia series here. I was introduced to Carissa Broadbent last year because I had read a different series of hers. I think the first book is A Daughter of No Worlds or something like that, and I didn't like it. I thought it was fine. I gave it like 3 stars. The main character was kind of bland. The plot didn't really intrigue me, and I was just kind of like, meh, I guess this author's not really for me. But then I had seen this series pop up on Book Talk and BookTube and Instagram, and I was like, okay, fine. I'm curious, I'll pick it up. And I'm so glad that I did. It was so much fun. If you don't know for some reason, this is basically like a vampire paranormal romance. It's got not quite enemies. I think some people categorize it as enemies to lovers, but it feels more like reluctant allies to lovers. But it's great. I won't tell you the whole premise, like you can read it on Goodreads. Adult me was not expecting to be so invested in the vampire stuff, the vampire lore, but like, why? I like fae, and I like, that's all that I can think of the top of my head. But it was great. It was so well written. All of the books in this world are fantastic. First book is called The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and then the second primary book is called The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. Both were great. I think I gave the first book 4.5 stars, the second book 5 stars. The second book was perfection. It was so good. But there's also a novella called 6 Scorched Roses, which you gotta read. It's great. And it like adds so much to this interesting world. You get to meet some side characters and then watch them come into play in the second book. And then there's a companion standalone called Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, which again is in this world. And Carissa Broadbent said that these characters in like this novella will show up later on in the series. I loved all the books. They're so fun. It's such a engaging, like fast-paced read. The romance is, I think, perfectly paced. There's like just the right amount of angst and tension. The plot is really interesting. There's like this crazy trial thing going on in the first book, which was a real page turner. If you haven't read the series, like if you've been skeptical because you think it's gonna be overhyped, I get it, but you should still read it. It was so fun. Okay, my second, again, I'm also cheating a little bit with this one. My second favorite book / series from 2023 was something I read way back in January 2023, and that is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. This series has stuck with me all year. I find myself thinking about it often. It is such an addictive read, and it's made even more bingeable because I think there's 5 books in this series, but they're all novellas. So they're so short and you can just breeze through them, probably all of them in one day. And it's amazing because even though these books are really short, you get so much character development and so much angst. The pacing is phenomenal. I wasn't kidding. It is addictive. It is so interesting. And if you haven't heard already, the premise is that she is a serial killer and he is an FBI agent looking into these murders, and they meet and connect, and you know, things progress from there. He obviously doesn't know that she's a serial killer, but it is so juicy. I can't even remember if it's all that steamy, but the plot is what sticks in my mind as being fascinating and compelling, and like I couldn't put it away. It is a wild ride. I'll absolutely be rereading it at some point this year because I must. 10 out of 10. It was so good. Love, 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 love. Okay. The moment we've all been waiting for. My favorite book of 2023 was Manacled by Sen-Lin Yu. What to even say about this book? Well, we'll start by the premise. This is a fan fiction centering Draco and Hermione. So it's combining Harry Potter and The Handmaid's Tale. And that's the elevator pitch. That's all you need to know. It is everything to me. It is so good. I think if that premise sounds interesting, or you like a dark romance or really angsty romance, like, you have to pick this up. I listened to the audio on Spotify weirdly, but I'm dying to get a physical copy because I want to put it on my shelf. It was so interesting. Sorry, Francis is playing over there. And I will say, like, I think this author handles so much of the content with such care and thoughtfulness and patience that really allows for, like, you as the reader to be immersed in the world, but also, like, you really get to know these characters and their motivations and their feelings, and you feel like you're growing with them because of how immersive and captivating the writing is. There's some dark, heavy scenes. So absolutely look up the trigger warnings, the content warnings, because it is not an easy breezy read by any means. Like, you definitely need to be in the right headspace because, yeah, some really awful shit happens to our characters on page and in, like, it's referenced. I just like can't get over how carefully the traumatic shit is handled. This book could have really easily skewed into, like, gore, trauma porn, like unnecessary violence, but it's done so carefully that it doesn't feel that way to me anyways. But it's also, you know, full of triumph and joy and resilience and cunning, and it's filled with all these other really positive things or interesting things that the story is such a good balance to it. I'm obsessed. I read it in October. I immediately started it over and reread it again in October, and then I read it again in December. And I'm already like, is this just gonna become my nighttime bedtime listen? Although then I have really weird dreams, so I probably shouldn't do that. But it was so good. It was so good. Please read it. I need more people to talk to about it. I'm obsessed. You have to read it. It's the best thing. I think it's the best thing I've ever read. Like, period. That's all. All right, guys. Those are some of the highs, some of the lows from my 2023 reading year. I had some really phenomenal reads, and then I had some really epic flops for me. So I'm curious. Let me know some of your favorite reads from 2023. What books let you down and you felt really disappointed by? What were some pleasant surprises and just huge flops or DNFs that you came across in 2023? I'd love to know. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you today. I always forget to say this, but if you've made it here and you like the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. It really does help my channel. Subscribe if you want more bookish or reading. I do a lot of like bullet journal, reading journaling content too. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you know, subscribe, do the bell thing so you know when I post. I actually don't care. This is like just for fun, so don't feel any pressure. I'm rambling. I need to end this video. Okay, see you next time. Bye.